At some point, we have all buried a peach, plum, or cherry pit, hoping that one day a small tree would appear. And almost always the same thing happens. Weeks pass, then months, and the pit ends up covered in mold or simply never germinates. Most people think they had bad luck or that the seed was dead, but the reality is very different. What almost no one explains is that these pits are designed by nature not to germinate immediately. They possess chemical inhibitors that keep the embryo in a state of dormancy and an extremely hard shell that makes it difficult for water and oxygen to enter. If part of that biological barrier is not removed, the process can take many months or fail completely. In this video, you will discover why traditional methods fail so often and learn a very simple technique used by many nursery growers and producers to increase the chances of success. We will talk about the role of 3% hydrogen peroxide, because a soak of exactly 1 hour can help reduce microorganisms and promote the onset of germination, and why leaving the pits in longer can produce exactly the opposite effect. You will also learn how to choose the best fruits to obtain viable seeds. What is the correct way to clean each pit without damaging it? What really happens during cold stratification? What is the ideal refrigerator temperature? How do you prepare a substrate with the right moisture? And what are the signs indicating that the embryo has finally awakened? In addition, we will look at the mistakes that cause thousands of people to lose all their seeds every season. Planting too early, using an excessively wet substrate, storing the pits incorrectly, breaking the shell at the wrong time, or confusing a dormant seed with a dead seed. And there is one detail that completely changes the outcome. There is a very specific moment when you must take the pit out of the refrigerator and transfer it to the soil. If you are too early, the seedling can suffer severe stress and stunt its growth. If you wait too long, the root can be damaged before being planted. By the end of the video, you will know exactly how to recognize that perfect point. If you want to grow peach, cherry, or plum trees from seed with a much higher success rate, stay until the end. What you will learn today is based on seed biology and techniques that anyone can apply at home with very inexpensive materials, but which can make the difference between a pit that never wakes up and a healthy, vigorous future fruit tree. If you take a peach pit fresh from the fruit, bury it in a pot, and water it frequently, chances are absolutely nothing will happen for weeks or even months. Many people believe the seed was damaged or that they simply had bad luck. However, in most cases, the pit is completely alive. What happens is that nature has developed an extremely efficient protection system to prevent it from germinating at the wrong time. Imagine a peach falling from the tree in late summer. If the seed germinated immediately, the small plant would have to face autumn and winter when it is still very fragile. Low temperatures would kill it before it had a chance to develop a strong root system. To prevent this, stone fruit trees evolved over millions of years, creating a mechanism known as dormancy. Dormancy is a state in which the embryo remains alive, but keeps its growth completely halted. It is as if the seed were waiting for a very specific signal, indicating that winter has passed and spring is near. Until that signal appears, it simply refuses to begin its development. And here is one of the details that almost no one explains. The problem is not solely the hard shell of the pit. Many people believe that simply breaking or opening it is enough to accelerate germination, but that only represents part of the process. In reality, inside the pit, there are chemical substances called germination inhibitors. These compounds keep the embryo at rest even when there is water, oxygen, and a seemingly suitable temperature. In addition to these inhibitors, the woody shell of the pit acts as a physical barrier. Its structure limits the speed at which water penetrates to the embryo and also reduces oxygen exchange. It is a perfect combination of chemical and mechanical protection, designed so that the seed survives throughout the winter without starting to grow prematurely. That is why many people water the substrate for months thinking the problem is a lack of water. In reality, adding more water does not eliminate dormancy. In fact, excess moisture usually produces the opposite effect. Fungi, bacteria, and decomposition processes appear, ultimately destroying the pit before the embryo has a chance to wake up. Nature expects something very different. It expects weeks of constant cold, moderate moisture, and a slow transformation of those natural inhibitors. This process is called cold stratification, And it is exactly what happens when fruits remain on the forest floor or buried under leaves throughout the winter. However, even before starting stratification, there is a way to prepare the pit to make that process much more efficient. It is not a miracle fertilizer or an expensive product. It is an extremely simple treatment that helps reduce microorganisms present on the surface and promotes the conditions for the embryo to initiate the germination step. This treatment lasts only 1 hour, but the timing is absolutely critical. A few minutes less reduces part of its effect, while an excess can begin to affect the delicate internal tissues of the embryo. That is precisely why, in the next chapter, we will see what happens during that soak, why 3% hydrogen peroxide works, and what the correct way to use it is without putting the future plant at risk. Now that we understand why the pits remain dormant for so long, we can talk about the step that has sparked the interest of many growers, soaking in 3% hydrogen peroxide. The first thing to clarify is that this treatment does not break dormancy on its own. It does not replace cold stratification, nor does it turn an unviable seed into a plant. Its function is to prepare the pit so that the germination process has better conditions from the start. Before soaking, wash the pit very well under running water and use a soft brush to remove any remaining pulp. Even small amounts of sugar can promote the appearance of fungi during the weeks of refrigeration. Once clean, submerge the pit completely in undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide. The time is exactly 1 hour. During that period, the peroxide helps disinfect the surface, reduces the presence of fungal spores, and begins to oxidize some compounds involved in seed dormancy. But here is the mistake most people make, thinking that if 1 hour works, leaving the pit for 2 or 3 hours will work even better. It is exactly the opposite. Prolonged exposure can damage the embryo's tissues and significantly decrease the chances of germination. When the hour is up, rinse the pit with clean water for about 30 seconds to remove any peroxide residue. Then, dry it gently with paper towels. From that moment on, it will be ready to enter the most important stage of the process, cold stratification. It is precisely during those weeks of controlled cold that the embryo will receive the signal that winter is ending and that the time has come to start a new life. After the soak comes the stage that really makes the difference, cold stratification. This process mimics the natural conditions of winter and allows the embryo to complete the biological changes necessary to break dormancy. Prepare a slightly moist substrate, never soaking wet. You can use clean sand mixed with a little peat moss or coconut coir. When squeezed in your hand, it should feel moist, but water should not drip out. Excess moisture is one of the main causes of mold and rot. Place the pits inside the substrate and store them in a plastic bag with small holes or in a container that allows minimal air exchange. Then put them in the refrigerator, where the ideal temperature is between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius. Do not put them in the freezer, as sub-zero temperatures can damage the embryo. Now all that is left is to be patient. Check the container every 1 or 2 weeks to ensure the substrate remains slightly moist and that there are no signs of mold. If any fungus appears, remove the affected pit, clean it carefully, and replace the substrate if necessary. Depending on the variety, stratification can last between 8 and 12 weeks. During that time, it will seem like nothing is happening. But inside the pit, the embryo is completing a process that cannot be accelerated with fertilizers or more water. Patience here pays off. Very soon, you will begin to notice a small opening at the natural seam of the pit. That will be the first sign that germination has finally begun. One of the most common mistakes is planting the pit too early. Many people see a small crack in the shell and think it is time to move it to a pot. However, that opening only indicates that the process has started, not that the seed is ready to grow in the soil. The signal you really need to wait for is the appearance of the radicle, the first root of the future plant. When this small white root clearly protrudes from the pit, it means the embryo is now active and ready to continue its development in a substrate. At that moment, plant the pit with the radicle pointing downward at a depth of approximately 2 or 3 centimeters. Use a light, well-draining substrate rich in organic matter. This way, the roots will be able to expand easily, and excess water will not cause rot. During the first few weeks, keep the substrate slightly moist and place the pot in a location with good light, but protected from intense sun throughout the day. The new seedling is still very delicate and needs to develop its first leaves before enduring more demanding conditions. If you have correctly followed all the previous steps, now all that remains is to let nature do its work. In a short time, you will see the first green shoot emerge. The proof that the germination process has been a success and that this simple pit is beginning to become a future fruit tree. Although the method is simple, there are several mistakes that can ruin weeks of waiting. The first is using pits from unripe fruits. The riper the fruit, the greater the chances that the seed has correctly completed its development. Another very common mistake is not cleaning the pit well before soaking. Leftover pulp and sugar promote the appearance of fungi during stratification, even if the pit was treated with hydrogen peroxide. It is also a mistake to leave the pit in the hydrogen peroxide for too long. Remember that the treatment lasts exactly 1 hour. More time does not mean better results and can end up damaging the embryo. During stratification, many people keep the substrate completely soaked. Moisture should be moderate. An environment that is too wet reduces available oxygen and promotes rot, while a substrate that is too dry can halt the germination process. Another failure is losing patience. Some varieties of peach, plum, or cherry take longer to respond than others. Constantly checking the pits, moving them, or changing the conditions every few days only causes stress and increases the risk of contamination. And finally, avoid planting the pit before the radicle appears. Waiting for that small white root may seem like a minor detail, but it makes a huge difference in the seedling's survival and reduces the risk of the transplant interrupting its development. If you respect each of these stages, a good cleaning, the 1 hour soak, proper stratification, and the right time to plant, you will have a much better chance of turning a simple fruit pit into a strong, healthy, and productive tree for many years. As you have seen, germinating a peach, plum, or cherry pit does not depend on luck. It is all about understanding how nature works and replicating the conditions these seeds need to wake up after their dormancy period. A good wash, a soak of exactly 1 hour in 3% hydrogen peroxide, stratification carried out at the right temperature, and the patience to wait for the radicle to appear can make a huge difference in the results. No step is complicated, but each one has its importance. Remember that every seed is different. Some will germinate sooner and others will need more time. The important thing is not to rush the process or try to force nature. When the conditions are right, the embryo itself knows exactly when to start growing. If you decide to try this method, tell us in the comments which fruit you used: peach, plum, or cherry. It would also be interesting to know how long it took for the first root to appear and what results you got. And if you like these types of practical techniques based on experience and science, stick with us. If this knowledge has transformed the way you view the seeds in your garden, make sure to subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the wisdom that nature has jealously guarded. Cultivate the future with us. The next botanical treasure will be revealed very soon.